Trust is like crystal, beautiful, valuable, and once broken, impossible to fully restore. I learned this lesson the hard way, not from strangers, but from the very people who were supposed to be my safe haven, my own family. The moment of discovery remains vivid in my memory. My cousin Tyler's lavish wedding in Newport, Massachusetts, champagne glasses sparkling under crystal chandeliers. Boston's elite congratulating the Reynolds family on yet another public display of success and prosperity. It was pure coincidence that I decided to step out onto the secluded terrace at that exact moment. My Uncle Victor's voice, usually controlled and calibrated to inspire confidence, sounded tense, almost frantic. "We need to replace Sam's money before she finds out," he whispered to my Aunt Diane. "At least now Tyler's problems are finally taken care of." I froze behind the ornate column, my heart pounding as the implications of those words crystallized. Sam's money. My money. The $1.8 million trust fund my grandmother had set up for me. At that moment, something changed irreversibly. Not just my trust in them, but my understanding of who I was within the family dynamic. Not the beloved niece who needed financial guidance, but a convenient source of funds to fix the Golden Son's problems. What none of them knew, what I didn't even fully grasp at that moment, was that my background in forensic accounting had prepared me perfectly for what was coming next. While Victor raised a toast to New York's in Tyler's bright future. In the grand hall, I made a decision that would change the fate of the Reynolds family forever. Because the trick to being constantly underestimated is that no one notices when you start paying attention. The Reynolds family's story is a classic one in Boston. 3 generations of financial success, powerful connections, and an impeccable reputation. My father, David Reynolds, had been the older brother, quieter and more contemplative than Victor, but equally brilliant in business. When my parents died in a car accident 14 years ago, I lost more than just family. I lost my place in the world. At 12 years old, I went to live with my grandmother Margaret, while Victor took over as my financial guardian and father figure. "Samantha is lucky to have you as her guardian, Victor," people often said at social events. "She's in great hands." And I believed that for years. After all, Victor Reynolds wasn't just my uncle. He was one of the most respected investment bankers on the East Coast. His opinions on the markets moved millions. His approval unlocked doors others could never dream of. When he spoke, influential people listened. "Investing is about patience and trust, Sam," he would explain during our quarterly lunches to discuss my finances. "Always remember, wealth built slowly lasts for generations." I grew up in the shadow of the Reynolds' greatness. At family gatherings, I watched my cousin Tyler outshine everyone around him. 3 years older than me, a Harvard graduate, working as a trader for a prestigious Wall Street firm. His magnetic charm and success stories dominated every conversation. "Tyler closed another incredible deal this month," Diane would proudly announce. "A new apartment in Manhattan, and he's not even 30 yet." Meanwhile, I took a different path. I chose accounting at the State University, then specialized in forensic accounting, the art of following financial trails, identifying discrepancies, and documenting fraud. My career choice was a subtle joke at family dinners. "Forensic accountant?" Tyler laughed one Christmas, swirling his 12-year-old scotch. "So you're like a detective for numbers? I didn't know the Reynolds produced cops. Someone has to keep people like you in check," I replied with a smile, as everyone laughed like it was just harmless cousinly teasing. When I turned 21, my grandmother Margaret formalized my inheritance, the trust fund she had established after my parents' passing. The amount surprised everyone. $1.8 million conservatively invested over the years. "Your mother and father wanted to secure your future," my grandmother explained, squeezing my hand. "This money represents their love, not just resources. It was Victor who suggested that he continue managing the fund. Sam, you're finishing college and starting your career," he argued with fatherly concern. "Managing this wealth requires experience that you don't have yet. Let me take care of it while you establish yourself." The proposal seemed reasonable. Victor sent me detailed quarterly reports, impressive documents filled with charts and projections that I barely skimmed. The fund appeared to be growing modestly, yielding enough to provide me with some comfort while I built my career. I started working at Blackwell & Associates, a firm specializing in corporate financial investigations. While I meticulously examined suspicious transactions for major companies during the day, I rarely applied the same scrutiny to my own finances. The irony of this situation would only become clear later. Meanwhile, Tyler was rising meteorically. His lifestyle grew increasingly extravagant. Yacht parties, frequent international trips, a new watch at every family gathering. His confidence bordered on arrogance, but it was easily forgiven as youthful enthusiasm by the family that adored him. "The secret to success is taking big risks," he declared, pouring champagne from a $2,000 bottle. "Playing it safe never makes history." It was during Tyler's engagement to Alexis, a senator's daughter, that I noticed the first subtle changes in Victor. Brief moments of distraction, tense phone conversations that ended abruptly when someone approached frequent closed-door meetings with Tyler. "Is everything okay with the business?" I asked once after one of these meetings. "Perfectly fine," Victor replied with his impeccable smile, his eyes sharp. "Just guiding our boy on portfolio. Diversification. Boring old banker stuff." I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because it was easier. Because questioning Victor Reynolds meant questioning the entire foundation on which my security had been built after my parents' death. That was 6 months before Tyler's wedding. 6 months before that conversation on the terrace that would change everything. Sam's money. 3 words that instantly reshaped my understanding of our family dynamics. As I watched couples dancing under the crystal chandelier after returning from the terrace, I saw my family with new eyes. Victor, the trusted patriarch, now seemed calculating. Diane, the affectionate aunt, revealed herself to be manipulative. And Tyler, my brilliant cousin, appeared to be nothing more than a golden facade hiding something rotten underneath. I didn't confront anyone that night, nor in the weeks that followed. The forensic accountant in me took over. Observe, document, fully understand before acting. "You've been unusually quiet lately," Noah Chen, my colleague at Blackwell & Associates, remarked as we reviewed financial reports for a client suspected of tax fraud. "Just tired," I replied vaguely. "I know that look," he pressed. "It's the same one you get when you find a major discrepancy in a balance sheet." "What exactly are you analyzing?" I hesitated. Noah and I had worked together for nearly 2 years. His skill with financial data was legendary at the firm, as was his discretion. "Hypothetically," I began cautiously, "how would you investigate if you suspected someone was siphoning money from an account they shouldn't have access to?" Noah raised an eyebrow. "Hypothetically, I'd start with the basics. Full transaction, records for the last 36 months, analysis of unusual patterns, tracing transfers. The devil is in the details. Embezzlement usually leaves consistent traces." That night, I began my systematic investigation. First, I organized all the financial reports Victor had sent me over the past few years. Side by side, I noticed subtle anomalies I never would have caught by analyzing them separately. Small inconsistencies in dates, transactions justified with vaguely technical terms, and the most revealing, a gradual erosion of the principal, cleverly disguised through complex allocations. The real breakthrough came when I accidentally mentioned to Victor that my laptop had broken while I was preparing for an important audit. As expected, he promptly offered to lend me his spare laptop. "Take as much time as you need," he said generously. "I know how relentless accounting deadlines can be." The laptop, synced with several of Victor's personal accounts, became my window into the truth. Using skills I had learned from corporate investigations, I discreetly installed monitoring and data recovery software. Every night after work, I dove deeper into the tangled web of family lies. What I discovered made me nauseous. Tyler was not the financial genius everyone believed him to be. Over the past 3 years, he had racked up massive debts through disastrous investments and high-risk gambling. Worse still, to cover his mounting losses, he had started manipulating transactions at the firm where he worked, temporarily shifting funds between accounts, creating an illusion of profitability, and making increasingly reckless bets in a desperate attempt to recover previous losses. When Victor discovered the situation, he didn't report his son to the authorities. Instead, he orchestrated an elaborate scheme to protect him, using my money as a bridge to cover ever-growing financial gaps. Approximately $800,000 had been gradually siphoned from my fund through a series of complex transactions designed to deceive any superficial review. Temporary. That word appeared repeatedly in emails between father and son. We'll replace Sam's funds before she notices. This is just a temporary loan until we close the Morrison deal. The most disturbing part? Evidence suggested my fund wasn't the only source being used. Victor had apparently diverted resources from other bank clients and even from charitable foundations under the family's management. The scale of it pointed to a much larger scheme, potentially involving dozens of victims. On one particularly revealing night, I found emails detailing how Tyler had used insider information to manipulate certain transactions, serious financial crimes that could result in federal charges. My God, I murmured at the glowing screen, alone in my apartment. This is an FBI investigation waiting to happen. The mention of the FBI made my stomach drop. Those 3 letters turned my already complicated family situation into something far more serious. If what I had documented was true, and my professional expertise told me it was, I had knowledge of multiple federal crimes committed by my own family. Mandatory reporting laws for financial professionals like me were clear. Ignoring evidence of fraud could make me an accomplice. But reporting it meant irreparably destroying my family. Victor's call the next day only deepened my dilemma. Sam, I'm organizing a family dinner next weekend, he casually announced. We have some exciting news to share. Tyler and Alexis are expecting a baby. Wonderful, I replied automatically, my mind racing through the implications. A new member of the Reynolds family, another generation. And I also want to discuss your trust fund, Victor continued. I'm considering some restructuring that would maximize your long-term returns. The tone was familiar, paternalistic, confident, slightly condescending. But now I detected something else, urgency disguised as casual concern. Sounds great, I replied, feeling an odd sense of calm. Actually, I have a few questions about the latest reports. Can we review the detailed records together? A brief silence. Of course, dear. Though I fear it might be terribly boring for you. I'm a forensic accountant, Uncle Victor, I replied smoothly. Boring numbers are my specialty. After hanging up, I stared at the evidence-covered wall I had assembled in my second bedroom, now an improvised command center for my personal investigation. Printed emails, bank statements, transaction timelines, all connected with colorful strings like in a crime drama. At the center, a photo of my entire family, the last Christmas before the accident that took my parents. Everyone smiling, unaware of the future that awaited us. I picked up the photo, studying the faces. My father, the older brother who chose integrity over extravagance. My mother, whose kindness I still missed every day. Victor, younger and seemingly less calculating. Diane, my aunt, who taught me how to apply lipstick. Tyler, back then just a talented boy without the complications of adult ambition. What would you do? I whispered to the images of my parents. The answer didn't come in words, but in the growing clarity of my next step. With slightly trembling hands, I picked up my phone and searched for something I never thought I would need. FBI, Financial Crimes Division, Boston. The FBI is nothing like in the movies. The Boston office was surprisingly ordinary. Just another office building, with no exterior signs announcing its function. The security, however, was impeccable. I passed through 3 checkpoints before being led into a discreet meeting room where Special Agent Andrea Collins awaited me. Tall, with graying hair pulled into a severe bun, Collins exuded unshakable competence. Wasting no time on unnecessary pleasantries, she got straight to the point. Miss Reynolds, I understand you have information regarding possible financial crimes, she began, opening a notepad. Why don't you start from the beginning? I hesitated, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. Before I proceed, I need to know something. If I share information today, can I still back out later? Colin studied me with sharp eyes. To a certain extent, yes. We're still in the preliminary phase, but if your information indicates substantial federal crimes, We will eventually reach a point of no return. I took a deep breath and slid a folder across the table. This is just the initial evidence. I have much more detailed documentation. As Collins examined the documents, I forced myself to explain the situation in clinical, factual terms, as I would with any other case. It was easier that way, to distance myself emotionally and focus only on the numbers. "Impressive," she commented, after 20 minutes of silent analysis. "Your documentation is exceptionally methodical. Does that reflect your professional training, or is there more to it?" "Both," I admitted. "Forensic accounting is my profession, but also, this is my family. I needed to be absolutely sure before taking this step." Collins closed the folder. "Miss Reynolds, I'll be transparent. What you've presented so far suggests serious violations of multiple federal laws: bank fraud, market manipulation, potentially money laundering. I understand that this is an exceptionally difficult situation for you." I nodded, words momentarily escaping me. "I suggest we proceed with extreme discretion," she continued. "I can assemble a small, highly specialized team. We'll continue the meeting when you're ready to share the rest of the documentation." Over the next 3 meetings, I gradually handed over my entire case: emails, financial records, detailed timelines of suspicious transactions. Each meeting made the inevitability of what was coming feel more real. "You can stop at any time," Collins reminded me during our 4th meeting, her tone gentler than usual. "But once we cross a certain line, the process takes on a life of its own." While the federal investigation proceeded silently, my family life continued at its superficially normal pace. I attended dinner at the Reynolds mansion, where Victor proudly announced Alexis and Tyler's pregnancy. I smiled, toasted, played, my role in the family play. After dinner, Victor led me to his private office for the financial discussion. Seated behind his imposing mahogany desk, he presented carefully prepared reports showing the seemingly healthy growth of my fund. "I'd like to restructure some investments," he explained with unwavering confidence. "I've created a new investment vehicle focused on emerging markets that would maximize your long-term returns." I watched him speak, mesmerized by the performance. Not a single hint that he was proposing yet another maneuver to conceal previous diversions or potentially siphon off more funds. "That sounds interesting," I replied carefully. "Could you send me the full documentation for review? I'd like to understand the structure better." A brief hesitation behind his flawless smile. Of course, though they're quite technical documents. I could simplify them for you." "I appreciate the offer, but I'd prefer to review the full documents myself," I insisted gently. "My work has taught me the importance of details." "Your dedication to your career is admirable," he replied, a hint of condescension in his tone. "Though I still think forensic accounting is an unusual path for a Reynolds. There are always positions at the bank, you know." "I like following trails," I responded with an enigmatic smile. "It's surprising what you can uncover when you know where to look." The FBI investigation intensified in the following weeks. Collins assembled a specialized team that worked with extraordinary discretion, understanding the sensitivity of the situation. Additional evidence revealed that the scheme was even more extensive than I had initially imagined, involving bank clients, charitable foundations, and even pension funds. During this time, I sought counsel from an unexpected source. My grandmother, Margaret, now in fragile health but still sharp-minded, welcomed me into her home for tea. "You seem to be carrying a heavy burden, dear," she observed, her keen eyes studying my face. Without revealing specific details, I sought her wisdom. "Grandma, how do you know when you're doing the right thing, even if it hurts people you love?" She considered the question for a long moment, her wrinkled hands delicately holding the porcelain cup. "When the pain of acting is outweighed by the shame of not acting, you have your answer," she finally said. "Your father lived by that principle, you know? That's what set him apart from Victor from a young age. Both brilliant, but David always understood that character matters more than achievements." Her words solidified my resolve. The next morning, I called Agent Collins. "I'm ready to sign my formal statement," I announced. As the federal investigation neared its conclusion, I noticed subtle changes in Victor's behavior. More frequent emails about my fund, suggestions of unique investment opportunities that required quick decisions, persistent invitations to discuss my financial future. The laptop he had lent me revealed the reason. Victor was fast-tracking plans for a major restructuring that would essentially place my remaining assets under even tighter control, shielding them from any future investigation. On a rainy Friday, I signed the final statement in an unremarkable room at the federal building. Agent Collins informed me that search warrants would be executed the following Monday. "Once this starts, there's no stopping it," she warned. "Are you sure you're prepared for the consequences?" "No," I answered honestly, "but I'm even less prepared to live with the alternative." I spent the weekend in a strange limbo, knowing it was the last moment of normalcy my family would ever know. On Sunday night, staring out the window of my small apartment at the relentless rain, I sent a final message to Noah. "I won't be in the office tomorrow. You'll understand why soon." The next morning, at 9:17 a.m., I received the first of many missed calls from my Aunt Diane. At 9:36, an urgent email from Victor. At 10:22, 7 consecutive text messages. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I silently watched from a distance as years of lies and manipulation finally crumbled, and the esteemed Reynolds family faced the truth they had so desperately tried to hide. The day of the operation had been meticulously planned by the FBI. While agents executed search warrants simultaneously at Victor's bank, Tyler's office, and the Reynolds mansion, I remained in an anonymous hotel on the outskirts of Boston, following the protocol set by Agent Collins. "We need to ensure you're away during the initial phase," she had explained during our last preparatory meeting. "Not just for your emotional protection, but to preserve the integrity of the case." From the hotel room, I watched the operation unfold through live news updates. The first headline surfaced around 10:45 a.m. Reynolds financial executives under federal investigation. Half an hour later, more specific details emerged. FBI conducts coordinated raids on prominent Boston bank. Fraud suspected. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Desperate messages from Diane alternated between emotional pleas and veiled accusations. "Sam, there must be some terrible misunderstanding. Call me immediately. Federal agents are taking Victor's computers. What is going on? If you know anything about this, for God's sake, do something." Victor's message was surprisingly restrained, just a few cold lines sent from his personal attorney. "I hope you fully understand what you've set in motion. There are consequences you may not have considered." The most revealing silence came from Tyler. No message, no call, a complete void of communication that Collins later explained to me. He was already negotiating. "Your cousin immediately sought a deal with prosecutors," she informed me the following afternoon. "He's offering information on broader schemes in exchange for leniency." The ultimate betrayal. Tyler, the golden child, was willing to implicate his own father to save himself. By the second day after the operation, the scale of the scandal had become clear. It wasn't just about Victor, Tyler, or even the Reynolds Bank. The case had expanded to include executives from other institutions, brokers, and even 2 local politicians connected to the family through questionable transactions. "Your uncle apparently facilitated a much larger scheme for years," Collins explained during our secured briefing. "Using his impeccable reputation as a shield, he essentially created a parallel system of financial flows for privileged clients. And my money? It was just a small part, but significant because it shows a willingness to compromise even family funds. That greatly strengthens our case." The following days brought an avalanche of legal proceedings, meetings with federal prosecutors, and relentless media attention. As the official whistleblower, my identity was theoretically protected, but in Boston, where the Reynolds name had opened doors for generations, secrets of this magnitude rarely stayed hidden for long. My public exposure came in the 3rd week, when the Boston Globe published a detailed article titled, "Reynolds Heiress Exposes Family Fraud: How the Niece Brought Down the Empire." The report painted a dramatic picture: the silent orphan, who, using her forensic accounting skills, had meticulously documented her family's betrayal and turned over the evidence to the FBI. Though factually accurate, the article lacked critical nuances, especially the agonizing internal conflict that had preceded my decision. The impact on my life was immediate. Strangers recognized me on the street. Former acquaintances sent curious messages disguised as support. Colleagues observed me with veiled fascination. At Blackwell & Associates, I was placed on administrative leave, officially for the firm's protection and my own safety, while the case progressed. Noah was the only colleague who maintained consistent contact, unexpectedly becoming my primary support system. His technical skills proved invaluable in organizing the massive amount of documentation required for the legal process. You did what any professional with integrity would do. He insisted during our meetings to review documents. The difference is that most wouldn't have the courage or the competence to document everything so meticulously. 6 weeks after the initial operation, I received a phone call that would once again change the course of events. It was Victor's attorney, requesting a private meeting. "My client would like to speak with you, Miss Reynolds. No records, no additional attorneys, just a conversation." I immediately consulted Agent Collins, who hesitated at first. "It's not strictly forbidden, but it carries risks," she warned. "If you decide to proceed, I strongly recommend a neutral location, a public setting, and that you inform us beforehand." After careful consideration, I agreed. The meeting was scheduled for 3 days later at a quiet cafe inside the Museum of Fine Arts, a place Victor and I had occasionally visited when I was a teenager. On the morning of the meeting, I prepared meticulously, choosing professional yet simple attire. Nothing that could be interpreted as arrogance or victory. I reminded myself repeatedly of Agent Collins's advice. Stick to the facts. Don't let emotions take over. Remember that anything you say could potentially impact the case. Arriving 20 minutes early, I selected a table with a clear view of all entrances. I ordered tea and waited, trying to calm my racing heart. Victor Reynolds wasn't just my traitorous uncle. He had been my only father figure for years, the man who taught me about investments, who attended my graduation, who raised toasts at my birthdays. At exactly 10 a.m., he walked in. Even after weeks of public scrutiny and legal stress, Victor maintained his characteristic composure. Impeccable suit, upright posture, the only sign of strain was the deeper lines around his eyes. Our eyes met across the cafe. This was the moment I had been preparing for weeks, the confrontation I both feared and needed. Victor approached my table with the same confidence he exuded in boardroom meetings. Only the slight tremor in his hand as he pulled out the chair betrayed any internal turmoil. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Samantha," he said, using my full name, something he only did in formal situations or when he was particularly disappointed. "I figured I should," I replied simply. A heavy silence settled between us. The sounds of the cafe, clinking porcelain, soft conversations, occasional footsteps, felt absurdly mundane for a moment so charged. "I suppose your loyalty to the family didn't mean much," he finally remarked, his voice controlled but laced with bitterness. "Loyalty?" I repeated, keeping my tone neutral despite the anger simmering inside me. "It was my loyalty to the family that brought me here. The turning us in to the FBI?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting definition of loyalty." "No, Uncle Victor. Loyalty to the values I believed our family stood for." I kept my voice low, mindful of the nearby tables. Loyalty to what my father would have expected. The mention of my father, his brother, elicited a visible reaction. Victor straightened, defensive. David never faced the pressures I did. Maintaining the Reynolds legacy, constantly exceeding expectations, ensuring Tyler had every opportunity. By stealing my inheritance to cover his mistakes? I interrupted, unable to keep the emotion entirely out of my voice. By diverting funds from trusting clients? Is that what the Reynolds legacy meant? It was temporary, he insisted, lowering his voice. A loan. I always intended to pay it back in full. With what money exactly? The scheme was growing, not shrinking. You were about to restructure what was left of my trust to cover up the previous theft. Victor didn't respond immediately. His eyes studied my face as if truly seeing me for the first time. You really are David's daughter, he finally murmured. Same sharp mind, same stubbornness. And the same commitment to the truth, I added. Why, Uncle Victor? You had everything. Respect, wealth, reputation. Was it worth risking all of that for Tyler's ambitions? It wasn't just about Tyler. His voice took on an almost confessional tone. The entire system. It's all about appearances, Sam. Today's success must always surpass yesterday's. A single sign of weakness, one small failure, and the vultures start circling. He paused, looking out the window. When I discovered Tyler's first mistakes, I had two choices: expose him, destroying his future, or protect him. I chose what any father would. No, you chose the easier path, not the right one, I replied firmly. And then one compromise led to another and another, until you were siphoning funds from everyone who trusted you, including your own niece. A long silence. The waitress approached but quickly stepped away upon sensing the intensity of our conversation. What did you want me to do? Victor finally asked, a rare moment of uncertainty in his voice. The same thing I did, despite it being infinitely harder for me. Tell the truth. Take responsibility. He let out a humorless laugh. And now Tyler is negotiating with the prosecutors, offering me up as a sacrifice to save his own skin. What irony. He's just following your example, I observed, protecting himself at any cost. Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. Do you understand what you've done? Not just to me or Tyler, but to the entire family? The Reynolds name meant something in this city. Now we're just another scandal, another wealthy family exposed as frauds. The name was already compromised, I replied calmly. You just hadn't been caught yet. For the first time, Victor's flawless facade completely crumbled. I saw the exhaustion in the deep lines of his face, the fear in his tense shoulders, the defeat in his slumped posture. What do you want from me, Sam? Why did you agree to this meeting? It was a fair question. In the days leading up to our meeting, I had asked myself the same thing over and over. What was I looking for? A confession? Remorse? Revenge? I wanted to understand, I answered honestly. I wanted to hear it from you, without lawyers, without facades, and I wanted you to know that I didn't do this out of malice or vengeance. No? His tone was skeptical. No. I did it because it was the right thing to do, because every person you deceived deserved the truth. I paused, meeting his gaze directly. Including yourself. Victor stared at his hands for a moment. I'm going to prison, Sam. The lawyers say it's inevitable. The only question is for how long. I know. And that doesn't bother you? Knowing you put your only uncle behind bars? I wasn't the one who put you there, I replied firmly. Your own actions did. He nodded slowly, reluctant acceptance settling on his face. Diane will never forgive me, you know. Not for what I did, and not for getting caught. And Tyler? A deep sigh. Tyler has always been good at reinventing himself. He's already positioning himself as the victim of a manipulative, controlling father. I doubt our relationship will survive this. For the first time, I felt a pang of genuine compassion. Not for the crimes, but for the man finally facing the consequences of years of self-deception. The investigations show that your scheme goes beyond what I initially imagined, I commented. Bank clients, charitable foundations, politicians. How long has this been going on? Victor hesitated, clearly calculating the risk of additional admissions. Then, surprisingly, he answered candidly. It started small, almost a decade ago. Favors for important clients, occasional rule bending. The line between privileged banking relationships and impropriety became so blurred that, eventually, I stopped seeing it. And my money? His eyes dropped briefly. I never intended to touch your inheritance. That was the one line I swore I wouldn't cross. Until Tyler made disastrous bets on Asian derivatives. We needed to cover it immediately, or everything would collapse. He paused. I told myself it was temporary. Just until the next big deal. which would never come, I finished. That never came, she agreed. Victor's phone vibrated. He glanced at it briefly. My lawyer says time's up. As he prepared to leave, one final question remained. Did you ever consider just telling the truth before everything got so complicated? Victor stood up, adjusting his coat with the last remnants of dignity. You might be surprised, Sam, but yes, many times, especially on the sleepless nights. A brief, joyless smile. But when you live a lie long enough, it becomes your reality. Until you can no longer tell where the performance ends and the real man begins. Extending his hand formally, he concluded, I suppose I should thank you for finally forcing that distinction. I accepted the handshake, the physical contact uncomfortably. Familiar. The same hand that had held mine at funerals, graduations, and countless family gatherings. Goodbye, Uncle Victor. I watched him walk out of the cafe, shoulders still straight despite everything. Only when the door closed behind him did I finally allow the tears I had been holding back to fall. In the months that followed, the Reynolds case became a business school case study and the subject of multiple articles on financial ethics. The family empire collapsed at an astonishing speed. The bank settled with regulators, paying substantial fines while struggling to keep operations afloat. The mansion was sold to cover legal debts. The charitable foundation shut down permanently after evidence of embezzlement surfaced. Victor, facing multiple federal charges, accepted a plea deal. In exchange for full cooperation, he received a 7-year sentence, significantly reduced from what could have been decades in prison. In his final court statement, he surprised everyone with a confession devoid of self-pity. I built my career and reputation on the appearance of integrity, while gradually abandoning its substance. He told the judge, the real crime wasn't just against clients or institutions, but against the trust that upholds our financial system. Tyler, following an aggressive legal strategy, avoided prison entirely. In exchange for evidence against his father and other accomplices, he received probation, hefty fines, and a lifetime ban from the financial sector. His marriage to Alexis didn't survive the scandal. The divorce was announced 3 months after his deal with prosecutors. Diane, though not directly implicated in any crimes, lost almost everything in the financial fallout. During her bitter divorce from Victor, she sold exclusive rights to her story to a national magazine. Betrayed twice, My Life with the Reynolds Men. The article portrayed Victor and Tyler as manipulators who deliberately kept her in the dark about their activities while painting me as cold and calculating. As for me, the legal proceedings left me in an unexpectedly strong financial position. I recovered not only the stolen funds, but also substantial interest and additional compensation as a federal whistleblower. Ironically, my net worth now exceeded the original trust fund. The true wealth, however, came from unexpected sources. First, my grandmother Margaret, whose health had declined during the scandal, asked to move into my new apartment. During the months we spent together before her passing, she shared revealing stories about my father and the early years of the Reynolds brothers. David always saw beyond appearances, she told me one afternoon. When others measured success in dollars, he measured it in principles upheld. Victor never understood that, even as a boy. Her unwavering support strengthened my conviction that, despite the devastating emotional cost, I had made the right choice. At her quiet funeral, so different from the Reynolds' usual displays of grandeur, I found a letter she had prepared for me. Samantha, you honored the true legacy of this family, not the money or the status, but the integrity your father valued above all else. Always remember, character is what you do when no one is watching. The second surprise came 6 months after Victor's sentencing, a letter from federal prison. Unlike his previous communications, always calculated, always controlled, this one was surprisingly vulnerable. Sam, I write not to justify or excuse, but to thank you. It probably seems absurd to thank the person who exposed my crimes. But you did what I should have done long ago. Stop Tyler. Stop myself. I spent decades building a facade I called success, only to realize too late that I had built a prison long before I arrived in this one. Here, paradoxically, I have found a certain freedom in the inescapable truth. No more performance, no more expectations, just the man I truly am, with all his failures and, perhaps eventually, some redemption. Tyler also eventually sought reconciliation, though in a more ambivalent way. In our first meeting after the trials at a neutral park, he admitted feeling both anger and gratitude at the same time. "Part of me hates you for destroying everything," he admitted, staring at the horizon instead of at me. "Another part recognizes that I was self-destructing for years, just too slowly to notice." The scandal transformed my career in unexpected ways. After months of administrative leave, I never returned to Blackwell & Associates. Instead, Noah, who had remained a constant ally, proposed a partnership in a new specialized firm. "The world is full of potential whistleblowers paralyzed by fear," he explained. "No one understands better than you the balance between legal obligation and emotional conflict." Our consultancy, Chen and Reynolds, quickly became known for guiding individuals facing ethical dilemmas in corporate environments, not just the technical aspects of documentation, but also the emotional and personal complexities of exposing wrongdoing, especially when it involved colleagues or family members. In an ironic twist, our most significant client turned out to be Reynolds Bank itself, now under new leadership and a strict commitment to transparency. We were hired to completely redesign its ethics and compliance systems, a powerful symbol of how institutions can potentially rebuild after catastrophic failures. At a corporate ethics event where I was invited to speak, a young financial consultant approached me after my presentation. "How did you know you were doing the right thing?" she asked. "Weren't you afraid of the consequences for yourself?" The question took me back to those agonizing months of secret investigation, the sleepless nights questioning every aspect of my decision. "I was constantly afraid," I answered honestly. "There's no magical moment of absolute certainty, just the gradual realization that the cost of staying silent eventually outweighs the cost of speaking up." 3 years after the case began, I received an unexpected invitation. Tyler's daughter Olivia, born during the tumultuous months of the trial, was celebrating her 3rd birthday. The card from Tyler included a handwritten note. She should know her whole family, even the complicated parts, especially the honest ones. I attended the small gathering at a community park, so different from the extravagance that once characterized Reynolds family events. Diane was notably absent, but Tyler displayed a level of attentive fatherhood that was a pleasant surprise. As we watched Olivia play on the swings, he offered an unexpectedly reflective comment. "You know what's strange? I've never been this happy with so little. All that money, all those connections, and I'm more content now teaching economics at a community college." "Maybe because it's real," I suggested. "Earned honestly." "Maybe." He hesitated. "I think Dad is finally finding something similar, you know. He's mentoring other inmates for their high school equivalency, says it's the most meaningful work he's ever done." That afternoon, driving back home, I reflected on the strange journey that had begun with an accidentally overheard conversation on a wedding terrace. The family betrayal had exposed the worst in all of us, but it had also, surprisingly, paved the way for something more authentic. When my uncles used my savings to pay off my cousin's debts, I faced the hardest choice of my life. Meticulously documenting everything for the FBI wasn't an act of revenge, but a painful recognition that sometimes the only way to truly love your family is to refuse to be complicit in their self-destruction. What no one expected, not even me, was how the truth, no matter how devastating at first, offered all of us a chance at rebuilding in a way that money and lies never could. Victor, Tyler, and Diane lost their fortune and status, but some of them found something far more valuable, the opportunity to finally live without the weight of who they pretended to be. As I often tell clients seeking our guidance in moments of ethical crisis, the truth isn't just about tearing down facades, it's about creating foundations on which something real can finally be built.